Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we are doing episode 47, which is our Words of Radiance finale episode. We will be talking about the entire book, start to finish, highlights, lowlights, what we thought of the book in general. This week, we have a special guest joining myself, Paul, and Elliot. We have Kiffin, who is a friend of Elliot and I's, and he's listened to the podcast for a little bit. He even writes his own fiction on the side a little bit. Kiffin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kiffin. I am, as Trevor said, I'm a friend of he and Elliot's, and I have read through the Stormlight archive once, and I've been slowly kind of rereading along with the podcast. I've really enjoyed what they're doing with this. It's been really cool. I'm a big fantasy nerd. I love Lord of the Rings and Terry Goodkind, Terry Pratchett, Terry Brooks, all the Terrys. For some reason, that's a popular name with fantasy writers. And I'm writing my own sort of Tolkien-esque fantasy in an Earth-like realm. Very different than Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, but there's definitely pros and cons to both, and I'm hoping that I can give some input of what it's like to do your own world building and talk about how good Sanderson is at it. So thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Welcome. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great. We've made it through Words of Radiance now. I'm excited to kind of compare and contrast with The Way of Kings, even though it's just like a sequel, kind of. So, yeah, looking forward to doing that. And then honestly moving on to, like, it's great, but, you know, there's a lot more to be had still with their next several books, so.
Sure. Elliot, how are you?
Doing well. I've been enjoying the nostalgia of like flipping back through my notes of some of the episodes we've been through. Honestly, it's easy to forget like just how far we've come now and how many pages we are into this saga at this point. Like we're invested at this point. We are multiple thousands of pages into this story. That like this is for real now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I won't ask for 2 words to summarize the whole book, so don't worry about that. I will, however, get us to rate the book, but I'll do that here in a second, and enjoy episode 47. Alrighty. Let's start with our general ratings of the book, then we can talk about more minutia here in a little bit. I'll throw it to Elliot first. In a similar way that we did for The Way of Kings, you're going to rate it for plot, characters, world building, theme, and point of view, and then give it an overall score out of 50 out of those 5 categories. So go for it.
Alrighty. Jumping into this Words of Radiance. Whew, what a journey. Just like The Way of Kings, you're a little exhausted by the end, but yeah, looking back has been fun. So my ratings. All right, so first up will be plot. So for this one, I'm thinking like the general story. I gave it a 9 out of 10 for first story. Very engaging, really, really interesting. Definitely hooked you from the beginning and held you all the way to the end, and always wanted to know what was next, especially in the second half of the book was really good. I docked it maybe a point just for, I think there were elements of Shallan's story that I didn't necessarily like so well. I think they were very well written, and I think it was very intentional the way Brandon Sanderson is building her character. I just didn't quite relate to it as much, perhaps. So just a little bit of a ding there, but overall still really good. Characters, 9 out of 10 for characters. Again, fantastic characters from Sanderson. Thinking of, again, kind of focusing on Shallan, since we saw most of her, even though we did see quite a bit of the others. docked it just a little bit, I think, just because Shallan's maybe not my favorite character. I didn't quite as enjoy getting into like the depths of her character as much as we did like Kaladin in the first book, but still way up there. I mean, 9 out of 10. I probably could have gone 10, but had to go with 9.
Sure.
World building, easy 10. Easy 10 for me. This is Sanderson's biggest strength, in my opinion. His world is just so interesting, and I was a little nervous that going into book 2 there was going to be maybe not as much to like dive into of the world. Maybe we've kind of already learned about in the first book. Not the case at all. As we learn, as you'll see when we get down to the questions. I have now more questions than I did when I started this book, and so always things to be learning and figuring out. So super fun world, love it. 10 out of 10 there. Theme, or Trevor, you tagged it with kind of the hero's journey as a tagline next to that theme. I'm kind of thinking for this one more of like the bigger, what is this story speaking to me? What am I taking out of this story and maybe applying it to my life? Maybe that's not the best interpretation of theme, but that's how I took it. This was my lowest score. I went with 8 for theme, just because I felt like this story didn't quite make as much of a statement on like morals and applicability to your life kind of thing as much as Way of Kings did, and so
right.
The theme just fell a little bit flat for me. Not a lot flat at all, but it was still a fantastic story with awesome characters, and the way the way the story was going and what it was saying to you was still awesome, but not quite a 10 out of 10. And then lastly, point of view, or like kind of how the story is portrayed to us as the reader. I went for a 9 here. I think I did the same on Way of Kings. I love Sanderson's writing. I like the way he shows us a story. It was more of the same here in Words of Radiance. Lots of good stuff. The only thing I'll dock him for here is I do wish, I think I talked about this in our Way of Kings retrospective one, I do wish he'd be a little more descriptive with things like scenery and whatnot. When we get to a scene where there's lots of images and stuff going on, I wish he'd spend a little more time telling me about what it looks like. I feel like I have to fill a lot of gaps with my imagination, so just a slight dock there, down to 9. But overall, super awesome book. I think that adds up to 45 out of 50 if my math is right. So really enjoyed it. Awesome book. Not quite as high as Way of Kings, but fantastic.
Awesome. Kiffin, we'll do you next.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I didn't, rate Way of Kings, on an episode with you guys, obviously. But I'll say before I start my numbers, I actually like Words of Radiance better than Way of Kings overall. But with this one, I put plot as 8 out of 10. To me, this book was a lot more character-driven than plot-driven, whereas I saw Way of Kings as, not that the characters were necessarily lacking in the first one, but I thought the Way of Kings was a little bit more plot-driven as opposed to character-driven.
Okay.
And then I would say characters, I put 9 out of 10. I really thought that Sanderson did a really good job in this one of giving us more from characters that we didn't get much of in Way of Kings. Like Shallan especially would obviously be the big one, with this book being her book of the Stormlight Archive. I found her as a really interesting character in Way of Kings, but we didn't really get as much of her as I would have liked. Like a lot of her chapters in the first book were slow, and I felt like they lacked in detail, and it was like it was kind of like that movie where a character is introduced and you're kind of that question the whole time of what is the backstory, like where did this character come from, how did she get here, why does she do the things that she does. And we obviously at this point still have a lot of questions about Shallan, but we got some of those answers in this book. And so I gave characters a 9 out of 10, mostly for her, but for some of the minor characters as well. World building, I gave a 9 out of 10. I think that Sanderson definitely, it's a strong suit of his for sure, and you have to give him credit beyond just building his world really well, because he didn't choose an Earth-like realm for his universe. You know, as you guys have talked about multiple times in this podcast, he's got the whole underwater vibe, you know, to his to the world that we're put in for this story, and I think, you know, he describes that well enough where you can fully visualize that a lot of the time, and I definitely really like that, and he does a really good job of like the kingdom structure and the world as a whole, and he definitely does really well with world building. 9 out of 10. For theme, I wasn't 100% sure what you meant by theme. I can see what Elliot was saying about you know, things I can take from it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I don't know if that's really fully where, in my opinion, of that category lies for it. I think 8 or 9, somewhere in there. There's definitely some good stuff you can pull from it. But I think maybe in this one area, I probably would have rated Way of Kings maybe a little bit higher than this one. And point of view is my highest of this. I love the way he does his exposition, even the interludes, which kind of take you out of the story sometimes. I love that random background that kind of just really piques your curiosity of like, oh, that character's really cool. Like, how is that gonna actually tie in with the narrative, you know, that we're going through? And then some of the 10 rating I have here might be from my own personal bias of the way I write. I also do the perspective jumping, you know, multiple character viewpoints, and so I tend to prefer fantasy that has that. So yeah, and so I actually ended up with the same total as Elliot, but with a little bit different, you know, breakdown of the individuals. 45 out of 50, very good book for sure.
I just want to bounce back to your highlights of the interludes where you'll catch a character and be super interested. I just thought of Paul and one of his favorite characters from the Way of Kings, Ishik, and we haven't revisited him yet.
Yeah.
I loved listening to those episodes where Paul was all obsessed with him and he hasn't come back. Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
It's like, man, like the pure. When are we gonna get to the Pure Lake? You know. No, if I may go ahead and jump into my ratings, Trevor. I actually want to go ahead and just start with point of view, because I agree a lot with Kiffin. I thought about it for a second. I was like, point of view, like, what do I not like? And I was like, I think this is my favorite aspect, just about. I love the aspect of the interludes where we kind of jump to somewhere random, and then I get to just kind of like speculate, how is this going to be relevant at some point. And then as we read, we get to go look back at stuff, things that we've learned in that. I absolutely love that. So definitely a 10 out of 10 for point of view for me. Jumping back to the beginning on plot, I kind of broke rules. I kind of broke the status quo. I put 8.5. And I did this for 2 reasons, mostly. And it kind of ties into characters, but my only complaint about the plot, I overall, I think I enjoyed Words of Radiance more than The Way of Kings. But it felt like sometimes we were waiting a really long time to get to our, like, pinnacle moments, which wasn't a problem. Like, the moments were amazing, but it sometimes felt like it was taking a long time. And also, like, I don't know, I'm almost getting the sense that our heroes are invulnerable, which, I mean, they, like, almost die a million times, but I kind of got that, so I kind of docked, like, the half point for that, honestly. Which, yeah, I'll get into more later, specifically, with our book summary, but that was the main reasons that I have 8.5 out of 10 for plot. For characters, I love all of our main characters. I think they're outstanding. It honestly hurt me to put 8 out of 10, but I put 8 out of 10. That was my lowest rating. I did that because of a lot of the secondary kind of minor characters I'm not a fan of. Most notably being I feel dumb I don't remember her name right now. But the lady that Shallan traveled with that was involved with the Ghost Bloods. Tin, yes. Tin, I think I really didn't like it. Maybe this is too much personal preference.
There's a lot of people who don't like Tin.
Okay, good. My complaint with Tin specifically is she's like a bad character, right? Like she's a bad guy, I guess you could say. But she just like, I don't know. I feel like they tried to give her way too much character. I don't know. I felt like the whole character was weird, and I did not like Tin. And then also just some of our other minor characters. Like the Ghost Bloods, I feel like that wasn't fleshed out that well, the characters there. And then also Graves and like Moash's crew, that is actually getting kind of neat. So I'm gonna hold on that as a complaint right now. But overall, that's why I would give it 8 out of 10, is for the kind of minor characters. World building, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I thought about this for a second, because I was like, it's not the coolest world, but then I thought about it and I was like, it's pretty good. I just love how deep it is. I was thinking of like the physical world, which is obviously an aspect, but I couldn't give it a 10 because of how many details they are and how well they all line up together. Like it must have taken forever to do that, and it was very well done. So I had to give it a 10 out of 10 for sure. Theme, I did a 9 out of 10.
You can change it on the fly.
I'm trying to remember why I gave it a 9 out of 10. I'm sure there's something specific. It's a 9 out of 10 because I say it's a 9 out of 10,
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was really great. I think, yeah, like I really enjoyed like following Shallan in this book, as opposed to Kaladin. I liked kind of the uniqueness it brought, especially with like the backstory. We learned so much. So honestly, I'll raise it to a 9.5. I'm going to change it on the fly to an even number. But the good news is that brings my overall up to an even number of 46 out of 50.
So, okay, I see.
Yes.
So I just want to pause on your rating here for a second, because you're talking about theme and you're talking about how you enjoyed Shallan's flashbacks, but you were one of the loudest critics of Shallan in The Way of Kings, and based on that, there's a lot of people who are just bored in Words of Radiance because they already don't like Shallan, and then they're spending a solid 600 pages of this 1,000-page book on Shallan. So that's a loud critique of Words of Radiance, is we already don't like Shallan, and now it's Shallan's book. Yes, we like her better at the end of it, but we're bored to start. So I think that's interesting that you enjoyed her flashback chapters. A lot of people are just annoyed by them.
Really? Okay. I think the flashback chapters may have been like my favorite. At least later. Early, it's very like
creepy.
Yes, for one.
Unsettling.
It could be a horror movie. I could definitely see that as a thing. I feel like coming into this, I started fresh. Coming into this book, I started fresh. So we have the whole Santhid chapter at the beginning, and that's basically just world building. Like, there's nothing super good, but I think of it almost as like the start of a movie. It kind of warms up. It shows you some pretty little thing, some cool stuff, and then you kind of get more into it. But I feel like it got way faster. It was way more fast paced at the start. Overall, and so I think it was
Elliot's
pretty
going to disagree with you.
At the start, I think it definitely was, in my mind.
All right, I will jump through my rating, and then we'll talk about general impressions of the book. So
general impressions. Sorry, I thought it would be funny.
For plot, for me, it's a 9 out of 10. I really enjoy Words of Radiance's story. I just think it starts slow. So it's a great story. You need the Shallan setup in order for her payoff later to mean something, and for her truths with Pattern, like they're not going to mean anything if you haven't been through her conflict with Tin and her inner struggle between who am I? Am I Yasna? Am I Tin? Oh, I'm both. I can be both type thing. But it's a necessary evil. Still 9 out of 10 for me. Characters, also 9 out of 10. I really don't like Shallan in The Way of Kings, as I said in our Way of Kings reflective. But having read what I've read, Shallan is one of my favorite Stormlight characters, and this book is a big part of that, obviously, because this is her book. I am a big fan of showing her as a capable and upstanding young woman, and strong, and then after you know her as that, you learn what she's been through, and you're like, oh, she's this even though she's already been through all this, and I didn't know that, like Kaladin sees towards the end of Words of Radiance. So I'm a big fan of creating that character the way Sanderson does, and upholding Shallan specifically. World building, we've said it four times now, whatever, and we've said it plenty of times in our Way of Kings one as well. 10 out of 10. I'm a huge fan of Sanderson's magic systems, the way you get to learn about the magic system, the world itself, the whole aesthetic of Roshar is awesome to me. I really love Sanderson's world building. I won't go on further. Theme. So each of you docked theme a little bit more harshly than I did, but I gave it a 10 out of 10 for theme, because to me what Words of Radiance is saying is you don't know what people are going through when you meet them, and in order for somebody to carry on day to day and pick themselves up and get themselves out of bed every morning like Shallan does and face the world, it's different for everybody, and you don't know what people are going through at any given time. So Kaladin, he lets everybody know that he's had a terrible life, and you can't talk to him for more than 5 minutes without you knowing that he hates everybody. But Shallan, that's not the case. And I'm a really big fan of Words of Radiance saying that there are both people in the world, but both have struggled, and you just don't know what people have been through. Point of view, 10 out of 10 for me. I'm a big fan of interludes, of flashback chapters, of switching point of view chapters. I think I gave The Way of Kings 9 out of 10 for switching to Shallan chapters, because Shallan chapters are boring. They're a necessary evil, but they're still boring. Yeah. But once Words of Radiance and all of our characters come together, it flows beautifully, and I'm a big fan. 10 out of 10. 48 out of 50. Words of Radiance is a really great book.
Good stuff.
I don't remember what my ratings were for The Way of Kings, so I don't know if statistically this is true, but I liked this book more than The Way of Kings.
Gotcha.
Are we split 50-50 there? Kiffin, you said you liked this one better. Trevor, would you side with The Way of Kings?
Oh yeah, I like. So my order is Oathbringer, Way of Kings, Rhythm of War, Words of Radiance.
Okay.
Pretty much exclusively. That hasn't changed since I read Rhythm of War.
Yeah, I think subjectively, I liked Way of Kings slightly better than Words of Radiance, and only slightly actually. This book, it definitely met what I was expecting for it. So, but I think I'd say Way of Kings a little bit better.
I think the action sequences in Words of Radiance are better than the action sequences of The Way of Kings, but that doesn't make The Way of Kings a worse book than Words of Radiance, in my opinion. But that could totally be different for other people. All right, let's talk about the first half of The Way of Kings compared to the first half of Words of Radiance, because both, let's face it, both are slow, right? Sanderson saves his pinnacle moments, as you say in the outline here, Paul, for for the second half of his book, and you need to earn it. Basically, you need to go on the journey before you hit the destination. And one of the loudest critiques of these Sanderson books is the first half is always slow, and I just want to get to the second half action. So I want to know your guys' thoughts on the first half of Words of Radiance.
I would like to go first. I'm going to interject.
Go.
So I feel like the biggest difference I can think of, so starting in The Way of Kings, starting off with Kaladin's story, if you look at Kaladin's story only, it's pretty exciting and linear, and like you see what happens. He's in his slave wagon and all this stuff happens. It's really fun and exciting, like really, a lot's going on. And then you switch to the Shalon chapters, and those are kind of the boring ones. Like, okay, come on, let's get back to Kaladin. In Words of Radiance, I would argue that maybe the storyline may not be as cool or as, I don't know, not quite as cool as the Kaladin linear story, but I think all of our stories that are happening are moving somewhere other as opposed to like the stark difference between Kaladin and Shalon in The Way of Kings, if that makes sense. Like, all of our stories are progressing, and I could enjoy all of them in a fun way, rather than The Way of Kings. It was like, Kaladin's just really, like, I was always looking forward to reading that, but then the Shalon was like more boring. So overall, I think Words of Radiance was better paced in the beginning, or more exciting at the start.
Even though you didn't like 10.
Yes, I did not like 10, but the story itself, what happened was really cool. Like, we saw Shalon's Shardblade, we had all this like cool stuff come up. We even ran into
Tavlaka.
a bunch of a lot of like other characters, which I think was really exciting and fun. I really liked that. Like, literally the only bad part was I didn't like 10's pointless details of like, oh, fake being a horny deer, like, I don't know, all this stuff. I was like, what are you saying? Like, please stop talking. Yeah.
Kiffin, you want to jump?
I think I would agree that the beginning of both the first and second book of this series are slow. I think personally the slowness in the earlier parts of Way of Kings bothered me more, though, and I think it might just be the flaw, if you will, not the best word, but of a first book, the sense of you're trying to get context built for you, and so when that's done in a little bit of a slower manner, it can be harder to like feel engaged. And I think one of the reasons that let me feel that way was the big contrast between the Kaladin and Shalon chapters in Way of Kings, because Kaladin, you pretty much are instantly like on his side. This is a really cool character, and you're very invested in everything he's doing and everything you're learning about him. Shalon, I always liked her, even in Way of Kings, as, the question mark of, this is a interesting enough character where I'm intrigued, but I'm not getting a lot about her. Right. And I think the early half of Words of Radiance, to contrast, I think I didn't mind the slowness there because it was slow narrative, yes, but I finally was getting some of those answers. Like Paul, you just said, we saw her Shardblade, we actually got a little bit of her backstory somewhat, and I was like, okay, now I'm not just invested in Kaladin, I'm actually getting more invested in Shalon too, and I think that investment carried throughout the book. Yeah, Kaladin wasn't as big of a character in the sense of we were following him quite as much in Words of Radiance, but I was still just as invested with him as I was in Way of Kings, but I was way more invested with Shalon than I was in the first book.
Gotcha.
Well
Elliot?
said. I agree.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think one thing that helps Words of Radiance actually is the fact that we had a fairly pivotal moment pretty early on with the death of Yasna. Well, sort of death, and it made things feel like they were important from the beginning. Like in the Way of Kings, there was some action early on where Kaladin got thrown into Bridge 4, and Dalinar and Elokar fight off a chasm fiend. So there were some exciting moments, but it didn't feel like there were any like pivotal, massive plot moments. Whereas right off the bat in Words of Radiance, we got boom, ship is sunk, Yasna's dead. Now what? It kind of slowed down from there and got into all the things that we're kind of talking about. But I liked that it started out with a big moment. I thought that helped Words of Radiance kind of grab your attention, so that was good. I think one thing I guess I'll say now, honestly, I think that especially in the latter half, not even latter half, maybe like the latter fifth of the book, I think Kaladin's story maybe overshadows Shallan a little bit, and I kind of wish it didn't. We were so focused on Shallan through the first 75% of this book, and I enjoyed her character progression. I loved what we were kind of exploring and learning about her, but then kind of the climax of the book, all I cared about was Kaladin and Szeth, and everything that's happening there on the Shattered Plains, which Shallan's there too, right? And she's part of it, but Shallan just didn't quite have that like big, massive crescendo moment that it felt like Kaladin did. And I like, overall, I like how the story went. I like that we had that moment. That's one of my favorite parts, is the big battle between Kaladin and Szeth, but it then kind of makes me question, like, this is supposed to be Shallan's book. She kind of fades into the background a little bit at the end, which I don't know if that's a criticism, just maybe a, like, I don't know, observation.
I actually have something important I kind of want to say. One, I completely agree. I definitely, at the end of the book, was only cared about Kaladin. So I think the Kaladin Szeth fight was super cool, and hypothetically, if we're changing the story, could still be there. But the moment where Syl comes back, Kaladin gets a shard blade stuff, I feel like that was the big, like, pinnacle moment. And I feel like we already had a big breakthrough like that in the first book with Kaladin. This is like that 2.0. It was way cooler. I liked this one more personally. But I was expecting something like that to happen with Shallan, and I think that never really happened. And that's where I fully agree with you on that, Elliot. Like, I thought we were going to have a big moment. On the flip side of that, I think what is happening with Shallan's story at the end, like with Urithiru and I forgot what it's called, the gate thing.
The Oath Gate?
That they're at. Yes, the Oath Gate. I feel like that would be way cooler and way more exciting in a like film or movie adaptation. Because whenever I'm like, you're reading this like intense battle and then it switches to them like, try scratching off the label with your sword, and I'm like, I'm not that invested. But I feel like there's probably a ton of suspense that could be well portrayed in like a movie or a show that we don't really get to see here, and so maybe that could be a lot cooler when visualized, in my mind at least.
I do want to go down this bunny trail for a second, because we talked about adaptations of The Way of Kings, the Stormlight Archive, the Cosmere, etc. with Tim on our Way of Kings finale episode. And Elliot and Paul, with you guys' limited knowledge of the Cosmere, and you've read one book, and you enjoyed it, but you have no idea what's going on. And on a larger scale type thing. So from hearing your guys' perspective on adaptations of Cosmere books is really interesting. But from just Words of Radiance specifically in a vacuum, I think would make a better movie if a movie was tried of both books. I think Words of Radiance would make a better movie. A, it has better action. B, it's more linear simply because of Shallan in The Way of Kings. Shallan's chapters in The Way of Kings cause a lot of problems for a visual adaptation of The Way of Kings, because she's so far separated from everything that you care about. And you start learning by the end of the book why you're spending time with Shallan. Oh, it's because Parshmen are Voidbringers. That gives a huge spin on what's happening on the Shattered Plains, but you don't care about it at the moment. So making a movie of The Way of Kings would be way harder than Words of Radiance, in my opinion.
I thought about this a bit as well. I think the way you would have to do it, which I personally think about it would be a fan. I've only read 2 of our current books, so this might not work at all, but I almost thought of it like the Chronicles of Narnia. There's like 7 books or whatever, but they're not in like chronological order. Exactly. And I was thinking if you made a Words of Radiance movie, and then like you could portray that very well, like the fun opening with the Xanthid, Yasna's death, like all the stuff that happens, this whole journey, pretty linear, like you said. Like I think it would transfer well to a movie. And then once we know these characters, you're introduced to Kaladin, but you don't know his backstory yet, but you see this super cool, Surgebinder guy, all this fun stuff. And then had The Way of Kings.
And then you did The Way of Kings as a back. I have
as
never
like
thought about
prequel,
this. This is a really cool idea.
It's like a prequel kind of thing, where that way you don't have to worry, because if you switch these perspectives, like you're assuming people have seen the Words of Radiance, so it would kind of fix that, I guess.
Okay,
but then
so
you get to learn the story and stuff.
Here's another twist on it. The Way of Kings Prime, the original The Way of Kings script, like his first draft, Kaladin starts as a captain in Dalinar's guard. That's how you meet Kaladin. And then his flashbacks are more the Way of Kings plot. Like, you learn how Kaladin got there, but you meet him as the captain of Dalinar's guard. What you're talking about is kind of similar here, that in Words of Radiance you would meet Shallan as the main character, and then halfway through the story you meet Kaladin. You're like, oh, he's really cool. And then later you would go back and make him like a flashback, like a prequel movie for him. That's a really cool idea. I've never thought about that before, that to make Words of Radiance first.
Yeah. Gonna pat myself on the back.
You deserve it.
Trademark that idea.
Yeah.
Take that to someone. Make some money.
Yeah, true.
I definitely agree with you guys. I think Words of Radiance would make at least an easier to make movie, and I think honestly largely because of the climax. Like any at least action fantasy movie has to have, an epic closing battle or moment or something, and Words of Radiance absolutely has that. I think where Way of Kings would struggle as well is you have a battle in the Battle of the Tower where Sadeas betrays him, but the really cool moment is actually after the battle. It's where Dalinar surrenders his sword to buy the bridgeman off of Sadeas, and I think that would confuse audiences a little bit. You would think this battle is the moment when it's not, so you'd kind of come out of that thinking that was the end, and then you might miss the importance of the moment after. So that would be challenging, I think, to structure together just kind of emotionally for the viewer, whereas Words of Radiance is very logical in that progression. So definitely agree. As far as Way of Kings as a prequel, that's definitely pretty clever. I'd probably have to think about that a little longer.
I'm definitely gonna have to think about that.
Yeah,
you just sprung that idea on me, and I've never thought about that before. As a concept, just make Words of Radiance first, easy. That's so weird.
It's an interesting idea. It is. Yeah,
Trevor, this is how it feels whenever you spring stuff on me and Elliot too. That's it totally shifts the perspective of what we're thinking of, and we're just like, okay, we'll talk about this next week.
This is when you're supposed to ask me any thoughts. That's when you're supposed to steal my line.
Yeah, true.
So while we're talking about movie and visual adaptations, what would be some of your guys' like most anticipated scenes in that video adaptation? What are you looking forward to seeing the most?
Kiffin, you got something?
Yeah, I noticed on the outline you guys stole the obvious one, so I picked one a little bit more obscure, but that I thought would be still pretty cool. So a scene that I was, my imagination was going crazy during this part of the book, both the first time I listened to it and actually physically reading, along with the end, kind of with you guys. Was on the plateaus when you've got the four armies kind of converging, and everything that Navani does with the weird fabrial and the tents, and they set it up where the archers can actually fire down on the enemies like without the rain being a problem, and just maybe that's not necessarily like a moment, but that whole sequence I thought would be a really cool like movie moment.
It would.
I don't think I mentioned this when we were talking about those sections, but I almost was getting almost like a steampunk vibe off of some of those fabrials that she's coming up with, like these little whirring contraptions that are making these cool things happen. No, that would be cool. Agree with you, Kiffin.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because the whole concept is it's really glossed over in the whole concept of the greater battle and what's about to happen, and like you kind of just forget about those fabrials. But I totally agree that could be a really cool Navani like movie moment where she's setting up these fabrials, and then like they expand and the tent goes up, and then the archers can like join the battle. Like that'd be a really cool scene. Right.
Totally.
All right, Paul, what's your most anticipated scene?
I am a stick.
I am perfect.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yes.
Like, do I need to explain, or could we just... No, I'm kidding. I had to make that joke, the I am a stick scene. Definitely my favorite scene, or what I pictured the most, and it's pretty cliche, but the Szeth and Kaladin fight. The fact that it's like above this huge storm, it's above the high storm, or this is the Everstorm, right? It's even
It's
crazier.
both.
It's even crazier. The fact that it's going on above it and they're just like flying and fighting with their shard blades is actually insane. And not only that, but like Syl as Kaladin's shard blade is changing from like a spear to a shield and all this stuff. Like that's super cool. I feel like that would be so hard to film or do anything, but that's definitely my favorite. Like what I would want to see the most.
All right. Did you guys notice on my Bridge 4 poster that Kaladin's spear is glowing?
I assumed it was a Stormlight, like it's near his hands, so I was like he's infused or something. So
it's his shard spear. But yeah,
Wow.
there's your. That's the last spoiler on this. There's nothing else to be salvaged from this. I promise. All right, Elliot.
Mine is same as Paul's. That battle with Szeth. I can imagine too, like just some crazy like camera angles, with Szeth and Kaladin doing their lashings like everywhere, where they're just like zooming and flying, all through the storm and just falling. I can imagine just some like pretty crazy vertigo-inducing camera pans where you're just whipping around and following the two of them, and it would just be super super cool, I think. And Stormlight and red lightning everywhere, and Szeth and Kaladin glowing. Like it just seems like a visual masterpiece the potential to be anyway.
Yeah.
Honorable mention. Go ahead.
IMAX 3D vomit type stuff.
Yeah. You have to be a little careful. Honorable mention for me would go to the Kaladin versus the Chasm Fiend in the chasm where Shallan is. There could be you could really ratchet up the tension with that scene of that Chasm Fiend, stalking them through there and then eventually chasing them into the little crack in the wall, and then the big eye, looking into the little crack where they're at, and then Kaladin bursting out and fighting the thing, and that could be a really cool scene as well, I think.
And the whole build up, you just got like friendly banter or not so friendly banter between Shallan and Kaladin, and then Chasm Fiend,
and Sharblade, big, lots of reveal moments there.
Yeah. Mine is Kaladin jumping to the sand to save Adolin in the duel. It's at the end of part 3 of Words of Radiance, where Dalinar is seeing how he's being betrayed by his other light-eyed friends, and he turns to the crowd and says, "Where's our honor?" And Kaladin's standing right next to him, and he says, "Honor's dead, but I'll see what I can do. If this goes poorly, look after my men." And then he jumps down to the sand. Oh, it's so good.
It is. Definitely. This was definitely my second choice. I mean, it's right up there because this was probably the coolest moment we had. I would say until our book ending. It was just an incredible fight, and I can never forget when Kaladin lashes himself down 10 times and breaks the shard plate with his legs.
His feet.
Also breaking his legs. Yeah, it's nuts. The only other one I kind of want to mention is Yasna's death and the shipwreck. I'm kind of just going off of this. I'm fully on this whole Words of Radiance is the first movie now state of mind, and just thinking that if there's this kind of opening death relatively early, you get to know who Yasna is. That Shallan looks up to Yasna, and she dies, and it's super dramatic and stuff. I feel like that's a really exciting way to kick off a movie. Your life is great too. I'm shipwrecked and alone. I feel like it would just be a really dramatic scene. So.
All right. Favorite characters in this book specifically, not both or the whole Stormlight archive included, Kiffin. This Words of Radiance specifically. We'll start with Elliot.
I struggled on this, actually. I really did. Looking at just this book, I really appreciated the Shallan story. I really liked the story, the plot of getting to learn so much more about Shallan and getting to understand who she is, what she's been through, where she's at. Really, really cool there. But I don't know that that makes her my favorite character of the book. I don't know that I like her so much as a character,
right?
Or as a person necessarily. Kaladin, I don't know. Kaladin goes a little emo through part of. Kaladin's already a little emo, I think, but he definitely has a rough journey through this one, and I didn't necessarily like Kaladin quite as much in this one as the previous one. So I'm pretty sure I said Dalinar for Way of Kings. I think I'm gonna have to say Dalinar again for this one. I really just like the whole leadership challenge that he's still trying to get through. The whole, how do we? Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. You have no idea. Actually, you probably do have a good idea.
Oh, I have an idea.
for that book. But in this one, we got to see more of the, how do you inspire the people around you to do what you need them to do? Do you force them to do it? Do you, just try and model the way and let them follow you? All of those tough questions that leaders have to ask, and we get to watch Dalinar struggle through that. And we didn't get as much Dalinar as this book, so I feel a little bit bad for picking almost a more minor character in this one, but it's still Dalinar.
Kiffin, we'll go to you.
Okay, I'm gonna go the obvious Shalon in this book, especially is definitely my favorite. I kind of almost wanted my favorite character to be Kaladin again, like it was in Way of Kings. But yeah, you're right, Elliot. He's like emo through a lot of this story. It's almost like borderline cringy Spider-Man 3, not pleasant Kaladin in a lot of this. I mean, still love him, but no, Shalon definitely takes the cake as my favorite in this book. And yeah, it may not be a fair comparison because this is her book, but just everything we get from her, and kind of like what we talked about a few minutes ago, just of how we get all of this insight into everything she's gone through, and then her ability to still do what Kaladin can't, in the sense of not bear all of that grief on her sleeve, on her shoulders, and actually be able to still put on the smile and portray happiness and kindness, and actually have that rub off on other people. I think is the one of the reasons why she's my favorite character in this book.
I'll jump on that train while we're here. It just dawned on me that for these, at least the first three books, my favorite character is gonna be like the focus character. Like the first book, Kaladin's my favorite.
Yeah.
The second book, Shalon is my favorite. I won't spoil, but you can
Yeah,
you can make
guess.
1 + 1 = 2. Yeah, okay.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way, Trevor. Definitely.
Like overall, as a full Stormlight picture so far in the first 4 books, Dalinar is my favorite character, but we haven't gotten there yet. So
We haven't?
no. Although he's really good in the Way of Kings, I will give him that.
Just go ahead and fill us in, then we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll just spoil the whole thing right now.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, and yeah, so Shalon is really good. I really enjoy, like I said, I touched on in my character's score, that the way Brandon Sanderson crafts Shalon through the Way of Kings, and I don't know if he intended this, but I don't think Shalon is anyone's favorite character in the Way of Kings. It'll definitely be a minority of people who are Shalon is their favorite character in the Way of Kings. But then once you get to know her backstory, and then you see her as she is, and as she carries herself through Words of Radiance, and is she suppressing her past, or is she going to face it? There's 2 sides of that coin, but she's still coping, I guess you could say, and she's a really strong character, and I'm a really big fan of her backstory, her story through Words of Radiance. And Paul.
So I have 2 answers. As much as I want to say the Stick, that's not my favorite character. He's way up there, though. So I have to separate my thoughts a little bit here. So I have my normal approach, which I would say my normal approach to this book. My favorite character is Shalon. We learned so much about her, and I love all the backstory and how it kind of culminates in her character. And then I have my Zeth brain, which I'm going to label it my Zeth brain, as in, I'm excited about interludes. I'm excited to just all the mysterious stuff, like Zeth, wit, etc. I'm just going to label it my Zeth brain for now. And that side of my brain, from thinking in that perspective, my favorite character is Wit in this book, because we see a bunch of, I don't know, we see him, I feel come up a lot more. We see him in the Shalon flashbacks. We see him talking with Kaladin present day, and it's always a bunch of weird stuff. We know Wit's a huge character. We even we saw him in Urithiru, right? Or with Rock's people. I don't know. We just kind of saw him all over the place, and he's a big mystery.
Wit? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, talking about Wit.
We didn't see him in Urithiru, for the record.
Okay, cool. I was thinking There was some time we saw him. He was talking with Rock. Rock was talking about it, and we're assuming it was Wit, and it's like the
Correct.
god of.
You are assuming it is Wit. I will give you
like
that.
Yes, we are assuming it is Wit. With kind of all the stuff that's
Elliot
happened,
has no memory of this.
It makes.
It's coming back. I didn't at first, but it's coming back.
Yeah, it makes me super like. I don't know. I feel like Wit took my Zeth spot in this book barely, and the like. Oh, I'm intrigued. Like, who are you? What are you doing here? Spotlight. So for that, I'm gonna say Wit is my favorite character. But it's like a tie. Like, that's my Zeth brain. My normal approach to the book, I would say Shalon. So that's really...
Paul, you mentioned the stick real quick, just as a joke. Mm-hmm. In the same vein, I would like you guys to open up the general chat of the Discord. I'll put it on the screen for our YouTube viewers. This came out on April 1st, 2014. This was apparently a deleted interlude, according to Brandon Sanderson, of Words of Radiance. This was going to be the first interlude after part 1 of Words of Radiance. That's the whole interlude.
Our stick scene, was that in part 2? Like, would this have been before we get to...
It was part 1, so you would have got it the chapter, like the next chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That'd be hilarious. I'm a little disappointed that did not make the final draft of the book.
So there's your Words of Radiance April Fool's joke that Brandon Sanderson released the year after.
Yeah.
Alrighty, back to business. Sorry to distract everybody with that. But, did we do everybody's favorite characters? Yeah, we did. Alright, so let's go to favorite quotes. Do you guys have one or two favorite quotes from the Words of Radiance that we can go through? Does anybody have theirs right in front of them? I have to find mine so I can throw it to someone.
I've got mine, and I can piggyback on the Wit discussion as well, actually. Honorable mention for favorite quote is actually in the interlude that's from Talon's perspective, the Talonel Herald guy.
Yeah.
And we don't know who's talking necessarily. You can kind of infer who you think it is. It could be Elokar, it could be Dalinar, it could be Adolin, somebody like that. But someone in there says, "Don't try to understand Wit. You'll only cause yourself pain."
That's a good one.
And I highlighted that one on my notes and reread it because I was like, "Yep, been there. In fact, I'm there right now, trying to understand Wit, and it's making my head hurt." But then also on Wit, my probably second, well, I had a lot of favorite quotes, actually. None that maybe topped the stuff we got in Way of Kings, but there was definitely a lot of good stuff in Words of Radiance, and one of my favorites is actually said by Wit. Let me flip to it and read it. He says this to Shalon. And actually, I guess we don't 100% know that this is... Trevor, you basically told us that this is Wit. It doesn't actually say... I
basically did. You're right.
It doesn't say in the story that it's Wit, but I think you can pretty easily make that conclusion. It's in one of the flashback chapters. It's the one that Shalon is at, like, the fair that comes to the place, and she runs into the messenger is what he's called in this chapter. But it's definitely Wit. And he says this that I absolutely love. "Keep cutting at those thorns, strong one, and make a path for the light. The things you fight aren't completely natural." And that's a really short quote that kind of sums up a larger sequence here, but I just love that moment where Wit takes some time to offer Shalon, who's in a really dark place at this moment. You know, her family is falling apart around her, and Wit just gives her a little bit of encouragement and says, you know, keep your chin up, keep going. It's going to get better. But even more than that, as I think we talked about when we went through this could perhaps be the moment that kind of awakened her light weaver-ness. Like, we don't know that for sure by any means, but it could be, you know, Wit sees something in her. He knows. He seems to know a lot. He knows, and this little moment could be the spark that lit a lot of things that happened later on. So I liked that moment.
I have one of mine prepared, and it's kind of in the same vein as Wit, as in that it's not doesn't have to do with our main characters that much. But this is an honorable mention for me. It's not one of my favorite quotes. But our Discord was very upset that we didn't talk about this in one of our closing episodes, so I have to bring it up now. This is the interlude in front of chapter 84. And Paul, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this specifically, because it is a lot of numbers. A lot of numbers. And when you listen to this, I remember very vividly where I was when I listened to this first chapter. I was at work and I was listening to it in my car, and I thought the audiobook had malfunctioned. But then I was like, what has happened? Like, it goes on. Michael Kramer reads numbers for almost a minute straight. It's probably like 55.
It's probably more than
like,
a minute. It's probably more than a minute.
It may be more than a minute, but he just starts reading numbers, and I'm thinking to myself, what? And then it says from the diagram afterwards, and it's kind of. Brandon Sanderson has mentioned this in one of his live streams, where he like publicly apologized to Michael Kramer about this because he forgot that he'd have to read this. Like,
so good.
As if it was, you know, dialogue or something. And so Brandon Sanderson's like, yeah, sorry, I could have just said a bunch of numbers and then had you stop there, but no, Michael Kramer goes for it. So Paul, what was your reaction when you heard this?
So definitely, I just kind of let it happen. It took me about 20 seconds to realize it was just going to be numbers, and I was not going to be able to draw any form of significance if I tried. So I just kind of waited until it was over, I'll be honest. I actually I think I have a really funny idea for like a little bonus video we can make down the road with this, which I'm not going to spoil now, but I guess be excited for it at some point if you're watching. But yeah, I like, you can hear Michael Kramer's like exasperated like breath.
You can.
He like, goes for a long time, and he's like,
Yep.
and then he's like 143410916, and like just keeps going, and poor guy.
Can I comment on that really quick too?
Mm-hmm.
I had a very similar moment to you, Trevor. My first listen through of that, I was also in my car, and if it wasn't for the fact that it was still Michael Kramer's voice and the fact that it kept going, I thought it was someone calling me and interrupting the audiobook and was telling me what spam number, and then it just kept going, and I was like, what in... Oh, okay.
That's really funny, actually.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, Elliot, I'm sorry you didn't get the audio version of this read to you, and then you were trying to make sense of it as it was happening. But what was your reaction when you just turned the page and saw a bunch of numbers?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to think. I stared at it for about probably two whole minutes, thinking, you know, ooh, I'll solve this. I'll figure this out.
I'll figure it out.
Now. Yep. And then I'm like, I quickly came to the solution, the conclusion that, yeah, I could probably spend hours like trying to analyze these numbers and try and figure out what they mean, but it's just not gonna be worth it, and I probably wouldn't get it anyway. You know, ideas that pop to mind, you know, right off the start, it could simply be some kind of a code where, you know, numbers mean certain letters. It could be a series of dates that just aren't, you know, split up correctly. It could be, I don't know. Basically, I gave up. I was like, yeah, I'm sure I'll come back to that someday and it'll make sense. But that day is not today.
Yeah.
There's another epigraph, which I don't remember which chapter it is, but it is a series of dates, or at least that's what the guy who's analyzing it says in the post notes. Like, this is probably a series of dates, but we don't know what it is. But that's not the case here, so who knows what it is.
Uh-huh.
All right, one of my actual favorite quotes is the page before that, and Kaladin and Moash are having confrontation. I read the full quote a couple episodes ago when we talked about this, so I won't read the full thing, but I'll read a little bit of it. "Then why are you protecting him?" Moash said. "It wasn't his fault." "That's a load of... It wasn't his fault," Kaladin said. "But I'd be here even if it had been, Moash. We have to be better than this, you and I. I can't explain it, not perfectly. You have to trust me. Back down. The king hasn't yet seen your graves. We'll go to Dalinar, and I'll see that you get justice against the right man, Rashon, the one who truly is behind your grandparents' deaths. But Moash, we're not going to be this kind of men. Murders in dark corridors, killing a drunk man because we find it distasteful, telling ourselves it's for the good of the kingdom. If I kill a man, I'm going to do it in the sunlight, and I'm going to do it only because there's no other way. Sorry, Cal. It's too late. You won't have him. I won't back down. I guess I wouldn't want you to." Moash slammed his faceplate down, the sides missing as it sealed. I just really like that confrontation, like the whole scene there of Kaladin finally understanding what it means to protect Elokar, and Moash just not getting it. And that's where those two have a division. And we'll see where the two characters go from there. All right, Paul, did I ask you for a quote yet?
I have one here. Mine is pretty cliche, and it's very close to where you are there, but I could read it. It's kind of just what I think of as the moment that definitely hit me the hardest as I was reading, like the pinnacle moment with Sylphrena. But I'll just read through that kind of sequence of events right quick. "The words, Kaladin." That was Syl's voice. "You have to speak the words." "I forbid this." "Your will matters not," Syl shouted. "You cannot hold me back if he speaks the words." "The words, Kaladin, say them." "I will protect even those I hate," Kaladin whispered through bloody lips, "so long as it is right." A shard blade appeared in Moash's hands, a distant rumbling. Thunder. "The words are accepted," the Stormfather said reluctantly. "Kaladin," Syl's voice, "stretch forth thy hand." She zipped around him suddenly, visible as a ribbon of light. "I can't," Kaladin said, drained. "Stretch forth thy hand." He reached out a trembling hand. Moash hesitated. Wind blew in the opening in the wall, and Syl's ribbon of light became mist, a form she often took. Silver mist, which grew larger, coalesced before Kaladin, extending into his hand. Glowing, brilliant, a shard blade emerged from the mist, vivid, blue light shining from swirling patterns along its length. There's not anything super deep. It's simply the sequence of events that was my favorite part.
Yeah.
With Syl coming back and Kaladin basically being restored, which was just super epic and definitely like my favorite moment. So that's why it is my favorite quote.
I love that. Love that one.
Kiffin, do you have one?
So we were kind of talking about who was going to read what before we started recording. You guys took the more serious, deep ones. So I have one funny one out of many that could be read. That,
Sure.
This is taking us back to Wit when he's talking to Kaladin. He says, "You know, I'm working very hard to come up with engaging, clever, meaningful points of interest to offer you. I can't help thinking you're not upholding your side of the conversation. It's a little like playing music for a deaf man, which I might try doing as it sounds fun, if only someone hadn't lost my flute." Yeah. And I really liked that one for a couple of reasons. One, it's just funny on the surface, but because it's wit, you get a little callback to the flute and how that's you look at that as a really important thing in college and just loses it all willy-nilly, it seems like. And then it's totally on wit of like he would absolutely like try to play music for a deaf man. Like we could absolutely all imagine him going for that, and it's completely like within his character. Yeah.
It's a good one. Yeah,
So good.
I really enjoy Wit and Kaladin's conversation. That's Fleet, right? That's the chapter Fleet when he's
yes, I
he's
believe
in
so.
prison.
I can double check, but yeah, I'm pretty sure.
All right. Closing Words of Radiance. We had a couple answers to all of our questions coming out of the Way of Kings, but not that many. Elliot, I'm going to toss this over to you because you had quite the long list of the Way of Kings questions at the end of our episode that time. And how's our news report for Roshar on what do we know, what do we not know, how many more questions do we have? Floor's yours.
So I've got some like major questions, which we can talk about in a little bit, a few seconds here. I know Paul shares some of those as well, but yeah, my long laundry list of questions is kind of like all the little minor things that I'm still left wondering about. And I did a little status check on my Way of Kings questions that I had. Going back, I counted up, I think I had 45 minor questions from Way of Kings. Of those 45, 10 of them have been answered, so that's good.
All right.
11 of them have been like partially answered, or at least like mostly answered, which leaves me with 24 that are completely unanswered. For Words of Radiance, I counted up just now 28 new minor questions that I don't have. So let's run through the list here. Oh, did I lose my camera?
Yeah, your camera died.
Gosh dang it.
You hate to see it.
I thought I'd fixed that.
Did Baylor win last night?
The men's team did, which is the notable one. The women were robbed. It was a mess.
Sag.
Yeah. But yeah.
Okay. Try this again. Okay. So I'll start with the remaining Way of Kings questions and then go into the Words of Radiance questions. So still left over from Way of Kings, we have Dawn Singers, Adonalsium, The Origin, The Sunmaker, Dalinar's Wife, Midnight Essence, Old Bloods, Risen, Aemians, Curse of Kind, Essences, The Scouring of Aemia, The 10 Fools, White Eyes, The Mistress, Dawn Cities, Long Shadow, Terra, Soul's March, Bright Caller, Life Brother, and Dawn Shards. And to those, I'll add the new ones from Words of Radiance: Aesodan, Backward Shadows, Unmade, Shah Anat, Santhids, The Long Trail, Larkins, Xyle, Invested, The Gift, Shalon's Mother, Wicked Thing of Eminence, Lunu Anaki, apologies there, Lift, Yazir, The Ring, Talonel's Blade, Ulalen, apologies again on that one, Moloch, Nergaul, I'm butchering all these names, I'm sure, The Thrill, Graves, Lopin, Sons of Honor, Nin, Gliss, Tanavast, and of course, Hoyd.
Hoyd? Question mark.
Hoyd?
Exactly.
That is the thumbnail for one of our for one of our videos. That's a good one.
That is still a very large question mark.
Mm-hmm.
What were, just out of curiosity, what were our 10 answered questions? Do you know? Do you have it in front of you?
I do. So the 10 that I marked off as answered, I had Taravangian, Shallan's family, Symbol Heads, Everstorm, Parshendi no Dalinar, Tef's... Yeah, remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Parshendi no
Dalinar?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We at least know why they know Dalinar, or knew Dalinar now. Tef's past, Moash's past, the Stormfather, the Envisagers, and Urithiru. The 11 that I felt were sort of answered, I had Ghostbloods, Odium, Fabrials, Noadon, World Singers, Amaram, the Prime Catasix, Hoyd. Oh, I guess I had Hoyd over there. Maybe I double booked that one. Ideals, Death Rattles, and Dawn Chant. So some information on those, but not everything.
It's a good list.
It is.
All right. So, major questions coming out of Words of Radiance, and then after that, I'll have you guys' predictions on Oathbringer. We are stopping for Warbreaker. You guys don't know why yet, but we are stopping for Warbreaker. But after that, we'll be going into Edge Dancer and Oathbringer. So, I'll have you guys' biggest unanswered questions coming out of Words of Radiance, and then our predictions for Oathbringer.
Well, I can probably start. Paul, you can jump in here too. My biggest question, honestly, coming out of Words of Radiance now is, what are our new Knights Radiant going to be capable of? We have Dalinar as a bondsmith. We have Yasna as an else caller. At least we think she's an else caller because she can else call. Truth Watcher in Renarin. And yeah, basically those three really. What are they going to be able to do? What are their powers going to be? How are they going to play a role in all of this? I really want to know that.
And Lopen as our...
Oh, yes.
We're guessing Dustbringer. I'm sticking with that as my guess. He's going to be a Dustbringer. Yeah, that's definitely my top question, or what I'm most curious about going into Words of Radiance. I was super excited to figure out, see what all Shallan can do. And in our next book, I'm hoping we'll get to see what all of these characters can do with their Knights Radiant abilities. Yeah, it's a huge one.
I think the next thing I really want to learn about, or I'm very interested to see where it's going to go, is Shallan's relationship with the Ghostbloods. We left it on a pretty interesting cliffhanger there, where Murray's left the door open. He still is wanting Shallan to be part of the Ghostbloods. Is that going to be a temptation for her? Is she going to try and maintain that dual relationship there of trying to manipulate the Ghostbloods while now embracing her new, very public role as a Knight Radiant? I'm interested to see what she's going to do.
I will say, I am also curious, but I'm assuming that it is going to become a thing since there's that open door. I'm just going to go ahead and make that assumption. We can tack that onto our predictions about Oathbringer tab. That we're going to see more of Shallan and the Ghostbloods. Just as a side note, as far as things that have happened in this book, I think that was my least favorite. I didn't care that much about the Ghostbloods. I thought it was going to be a bigger deal, and then I ended up caring about everything else more. So I'm hoping it becomes, I don't know. I would like to see that ramp up to be a more relevant thing. It felt like it was almost a major thing, but not quite.
So it wasn't your favorite, and I think you just said it was one of your least favorite things. So do you want more of it so that it becomes something important to you, or do you want less, or do you not care?
I feel like it can't just be dropped. I feel like it cannot be dropped. I feel like something else should happen for the continuity of our story, in a sense. And I hope if anything happens, or whatever happens, is really big and exciting, or something major, because I wasn't I wasn't fully invested. I didn't think it was that exciting. I guess. So it was kind of a question mark, but I wasn't that intrigued in the mystery of the Ghost Bloods. Like, the biggest thing that intrigues me is, like, there's a lot of people that were involved, and we don't understand their connection to the Ghost Bloods. So I would like for those questions to be answered, but yeah, I don't necessarily want more, but I feel like it needs to be brushed up a little bit.
Kiffin, I meant to ask you, how is your format of reading the Stormlight Archive through for the first time? Did you have a stop between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer? Or did you just hit play on the next one?
I was actually getting them from the library, the audiobooks from the library, so I had a decent wait time because they're, so popular, because Sanderson's so good, between them. So I always, I would put the next book on hold while I was still finishing the previous one, but even trying to compensate for the time it would take me to finish it, I usually had, whether I wanted it or not, a couple weeks at least to let kind of the last one soak in before I got to start the next one. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, me and Elliot are having to wait too, because Trevor's making us read Warbreaker. So
I am.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Paul, on the outline here, you say we have a herald, and I feel like that's a minor point. So go ahead and talk about that, and then I'll read something to kind of spark your interest here.
For sure, yeah. So we have Talonel, right? Talonel Lynn, and that was like kind of the last thing we saw in The Way of Kings, and so I was super excited in Words of Radiance for this to be fleshed out, and we learned a lot. We at least learned a lot about like his sword and I don't know, some things there, but the only time we really met with him, right, was it, I could be incorrect, I believe it was when Shallan goes and talks to him, or someone goes and talks to him, and Amaram is there, and it's kind of weird, but he doesn't really, we don't really get any information from him. He's kind of just a crazy guy, which is kind of fair. If it stays at that, honestly, that's kind of okay. But I was hoping for some intelligent conversations with Talonel, or something that would, that he would become a major player in our story and not just be some crazy guy that we don't understand.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I had that. I would say that's probably my biggest unanswered question. My next one, which is not written on our outline, but it's very pressing, is our, it's not that big of a question. It's Zeth's new sword, who said very fancily, hello, would you like to do some killing today? Very proper. I'm just taking it that it's a spren like our others. But I'm just curious if I want to relate it to our dark sphere, so that's what I'm hoping for in some way.
I'll talk about Zeth and Zeth's sword here in a second, but circling back to your herald, we do have, we have one herald, and we have another who's claiming to be a herald, so we have two, and it's our scar-faced man that we've seen surface a couple times, and I want to read you guys an excerpt from the prologue of this book, Words of Radiance, and have you think about that in context of him being a herald at this point. You're worried about everything. Yasna hesitated in the hallway. She's getting worse, the voice continued. We weren't supposed to get worse. Am I getting worse? I feel like I'm getting worse. Shut up. I don't like this. What we've done was wrong. That creature carries my lord's own blade. We shouldn't have let him keep it. The two passed through the intersection ahead of Yasna. They were ambassadors from the west, including the Azish man with the white birthmark on his cheek. Or was it a scar? The shorter of the two men, he could have been a Lethi, cut off when he noticed Yasna. He let out a squeak and then hurried on his way.
So, what I instantly took was that we hear him with a guy who I'm assuming is a Windrunner, because I'm assuming they're talking about Zeth with his Windrunner honor blade.
Okay.
And so he's with a Windrunner, and he's like, wait, hold on, that guy has the Windrunner honor blade. I need that, or we need that, but I don't know. So, I don't know, is there like a Knights Radiant Secret Service that's underground? I don't know.
It's the guys who pull up in the black SUVs and just, take it. And there's no markings on anything. It's like, all right, we're the Knights Radiant. You're gonna have to come with us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Elliot, I saw some gears turning for you. Any thoughts here?
I came to the same conclusion that Paul did there, with that perhaps being a reference to Zeth and the honor blade that he has. I'm going to have to go back and read it like in front of me, because it's hard for me to decide which voice is whose. As they're, as Yasna's coming around the corner, she just hears the two of them. I'm not sure which one is speaking, but the whole, I feel like I'm getting worse. Am I getting worse? Are we supposed to get worse? Like that part. Is that the big Scarface guy that's claiming to be the Herald, or is that the other guy, which, like, I'm with you, Paul, seems to perhaps maybe be like a Windrunner, maybe subservient, not necessarily a Herald person. So that would be a big important factor in trying to decide what that means. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go read that again.
Just some food for thought with your. If that gives you any context as to what the first time reader sees and what the rereader sees, there's some really good stuff in these books for rereading. So that
is actually really cool.
There's a good taste for you. That's something you've already read, and then you had no idea what you were reading. So, and you still have no idea. All right. Oathbringer. Predictions. What's happening in Oathbringer? What is not happening in Oathbringer?
I feel like the easy answer is we're gonna learn about Dalinar's past. It's his book, so we're gonna learn about that.
Here's your petty applause.
Specifically, like, I think we're gonna find out about his wife and the specific like curse he received.
We better.
Yeah, if not here, then I give up on those. So it's no longer an important thing if that is not answered in this book.
All right, I'm gonna bring it up. The Dark Sphere. Are we hearing anything about the Dark Sphere in the third book? We didn't hear a word. The second book, like, was it even ever mentioned in Words of Radiance at all?
It was not, but I think we talked about this in our last episode about the book, about our dark sword for Zeth.
Right.
He gets a shard blade that is described as dark, and so I'm like, that's the dark. It's correlated to the Dark Sphere. They're the same. They're cousins. I don't know. So I don't know. That's as close as you can get to like an illusion of it. No, it's not mentioned.
Is it going to be mentioned in Oathbringer?
It's going to be hinted at this time. We're going to get like a subtle hint.
Okay. Kiffin, are you having as much fun as I am? It's pretty fun.
We'll get like one or two hints. It may be something that we don't even know until like later, like that it was a hint. But
Zeth is no longer bonded to his stone, and so he's free to go pick it back up if he wants. Like he's a free man ish. He's talking to a Skybreaker Herald dude, so he's still around. So we might see it. Elliot, any bold Oathbringer predictions for you?
I've got a few. I will say, I think that dark orb is going to come back in Oathbringer. I think it's going to be part of Szeth's storyline, whether it's directly tied to the sword or not. I think Szeth is going to have more freedom than he's ever had before, and he's going to remember that orb. He's going to remember back to Gavilar and realize, hey, that was important, and it's going to come into play. I think, too, that Szeth is going to be a big part of Oathbringer, at least maybe not, maybe only in like interludes or occasionally. But Paul, I hate to predict this for your character, but I think he's going to come back, and I think he's going to be like stronger and even scarier than we've ever seen him before. I think that he's going to take freedom, and it's not going to be a good thing for him. I think it's going to be a bad thing for him.
That was going to be my question. Is he going to? You said he's going to come back stronger. Does that make him more evil, or does that make like what's your angle there?
I think he's going to go full-on villain, and Szeth in full control of his abilities and decisions is going to be even scarier than Szeth being controlled by someone else who hates himself the whole time. Like, Szeth with a purpose is going to be way more terrifying than broken Szeth being, driven by someone else. That's my prediction.
True. I think if that is to happen, I think it will come, or at least begin, in the form of lashing back out at who.
Lashing. Sorry, had to.
Funny, very funny. Lashing back out at the people who have like wronged him in the past. I don't think he's gonna just instantly go try and mess with Kaladin or something, but he's gonna probably go for like Taravangian and stuff maybe. So I can see that happening. Me being the big, irrefutable Szeth fan that I am, and refuse to believe that he's going to be a villain, is like, oh, he's freed. He's going to like have this whole character arc where he's going to become a good guy, and he's going to joining with our beloved characters in some way, shape, or form. So I'm rooting for that one at the moment, but very much could see exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. My only other thoughts for Oathbringer predictions, and I'm curious, I don't know if we want to place our bets or not, but I think we're gonna have a major character death, like a pretty big one. My first thought honestly was Kaladin. Like, I could see Kaladin dying. Yeah. And I was saying that only because we've had a whole lot of development with him, right? I feel like he's almost reached his peak. Like he's, his time might just be over. Like, we've gotten a whole lot from Kaladin, and so it would probably be one of the most painful deaths, if not the most painful death we could have from our characters.
But what about our love triangle? We'd lose our love triangle.
That's true. That was a big reason why I thought that wouldn't be it, because then that gets rid of the love triangle. Kaladin and Shallan still have to fall in love. That hasn't happened yet. It's getting there.
So what you're saying is Kaladin's time is done. Embrace the Lopin, is what you're saying. Lopin's time is here.
Yes. That is exactly what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
If it's not... Which I don't think it... Realistically guessing, I don't think it would be Kaladin yet, because love triangle and other things going on. I could see very well one of our, like, really liked characters that's not major, but close to it, like Rock or Taft. So more that it... I think if there's going to be a death, it's going to need to hurt. Not like Royan, who died, like, okay, So... That's my guess, is that we're going to have a big death at some point in our next book.
I completely agree. I think we talked a little bit in our most recent episode about the fact that we didn't lose a character in Words of Radiance, at least not a major one. We lost a few minor ones, and anybody who died came back, and anybody who almost died didn't die. The biggest, most major character maybe we lost was Sadeas, and he was a villain.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think in the next one we're going to lose. I think we're going to lose a major character, and I think it's going to be early. I think it's going to be same as Words of Radiance, where we lost Yasna early. I think that Brando might hit us right off the bat with a loss to kind of, maybe make up for the fact that we didn't lose anybody through Words of Radiance. I was trying to think through who I think we might lose. The name that kept like jumping out to me, what about Renarin? Like, we've just kind of had a moment where we connected with Renarin, and he had that awesome hero moment during the duel where he charged out to try and help Adolin there, even though he knew he was likely going to die. We just learned that he's a Knight Radiant. Maybe he's going to be, I'm the Truth Watcher. Here's all my seer predictions for the future, and then die.
Okay.
Maybe.
I can see that. If that happens, I think we're going to have some specifically Renarin chapters for a while, because I think we've got to see his spread and his whole development there. One other thing I want to say, this is my last prediction, and it's kind of just a fun one. Trevor made the remark, and it has not left my head since, of, like, you couldn't guess who the prologue, like, whose perspective it's going to be from in Oathbringer. And so I'm like, okay, who's it going to be from? And I was trying to think, he could be totally right that I can't guess it. Maybe it's some character we don't even know. That's what I'm afraid of, because then I can't guess it.
Here, I'll give you this. You have met the character.
Okay. I'm going to say it is... If I'm to guess, I'm going to actually guess that it's from Gavilar's perspective.
Okay.
That's my first guess. Second guess, I was trying to think of, like, obscure characters. I don't know if this would work. Is Dalinar's wife dead at this point? I know she's dead in our current story. Is she...
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just say, if she's alive, that it could be from her perspective. So we wouldn't think of, and also could end up being something major. Because I feel like it's kind of alluded to, like, back of our minds, that she's something big because Dalinar can't remember her. That could just be a...
Quite literally the back of your mind, because Dalinar can't, yeah.
Yeah, quite literally. So yeah, that was just my rough guesses on who our prologue perspective will be from. Mm-hmm.
Elliot, do you have any guesses on while we're on here, who the perspective of Oathbringer's prologue is?
Sebarial.
Let's go. That's a bold prediction. I am a big fan of that prediction.
I have one more prediction about Adolin. I think in Oathbringer, Adolin is going to have a Spider-Man 3 moment, like Kaladin did in this one. I think Adolin's going to have a rough time. I think he's going to struggle, one, with the decision he just made to kill Sadeas in the way that he did. I think that's going to come back to haunt him. I think that's going to turn him on perhaps a slightly darker path. And then, if you think about it, his whole family just became Knights Radiant. Dalinar is now a Knight Radiant. Renarin is a Knight Radiant. Yasna is a Knight Radiant. His betrothed is a Knight Radiant. I think Adolin's going to feel pretty left out. Unless he bonds a Spren or something, like, pretty early on or whatnot. But he could very quickly get left behind in, like, the importance of this all. And I don't think Adolin would take that very well based on what we know of him so far. So I think Adolin might have a dark road ahead of him in the next book.
And Kaladin, his bridge boy rival that might quickly find himself in a love triangle with, is Surge Binding, and he's not. So I could totally see where you're coming from here. All right. Any closing thoughts on Words of Radiance finale episode?
Adolin just needs to take the Lopen route and just sit there and kind of look at the sphere
trying
until you can suck it in and just keep trying.
Do it.
Suck in some Stormlight. Yeah, exactly.
I did want to talk, Trevor, about theme of the book in general.
Sure.
If we've got a couple minutes here, you know I like to try and pick out one word or concept that stood out to me the most through the different parts of the book, and then I I like to do that for the whole book as well. And looking back over my themes of each different parts, my theme of part 1 for Words of Radiance was change, with all the change that Shallan was having to deal with. Then we had expectation in the second part, which was kind of what expectations does Shallan have for herself? Who is she becoming? She sets high expectations for these brigands that she finds, and they live up to that. They become like these really loyal guards of hers for the rest of the book. Section 3 was justice, all about the justice. I think we had the Amaram part of that all in there with Kaladin and Amaram. Does Kaladin get justice on him? Part 4, I had brokenness for the brokenness that we see in Shallan of her past and what she's done and what she's lived through. And then 5 was revelation, with all of the information that got kind of dropped on us at the end. Looking back over the whole book as a whole, Trevor, this actually plays into what you, I think, were talking about at the very beginning of this episode, and I completely agree with you. I think the resounding message or part of this book that really sticks with me is the one word I would put on it is resilience, and thinking mostly of Shallan here, and just the fact that she's gone through so much trauma, so much darkness, and yet she still can come out on the other side of that as a light to others, and how she can, Kaladin looks at her and sees the same sorrow and hurt that he feels in himself, and yet she has this positive outlook on life, and she can brighten his day, even though she's been through just as much, if not more, horrible stuff than he has. And so just that resilience to be able to go through that and continue on, to keep getting out of bed in the morning, even though you've been through that terribleness. And Kaladin a little bit as well, I think, shows some resilience, because we joke about he's a little emo in this book, but he pulls through it, right? He has his darkness, and he strays off the path of windrunnerness and loses Spren. He kills her or whatever, but he redeems himself. He comes back. He has. Yeah.
Sorry. He kills Syl or whatever,
And then she's back.
Something.
Yep. But the fact that he sticks with it, and he shows enough tenacity and perseverance to realize, what, this is the right thing to do. And so I'll group that under resilience as well. And I think you can even apply the term resilience to Szeth in the journey that he's been on here. He clung so hard to the belief that he had that he was doing what he was supposed to do, and then all of that gets shattered by the realization that Kaladin is truly a Knight Radiant, and that way that it just completely breaks him. But then even when he dies, he doesn't. He comes back, and now he has a chance to maybe redeem himself or walk a new path that he's given. So yeah, all of that tried to wrap up in the word resilience for Words of Radiance. A very powerful theme, I thought. A very convicting one, I think.
Cool. Kiffin, do you have any closing thoughts for Words of Radiance?
I think you guys pretty much hit everything. Don't really have too much to add. I don't really know. This isn't exactly closing Words of Radiance, but it's upcoming for you guys in the podcast. So I don't really know what Warbreaker. Am I saying
Warbreaker?
Right? Warbreaker. Sorry. Yeah, I don't really know what Warbreaker covers. So I'm gonna be curious to see why you're having them read this before they move on to Oathbringer.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of my closing thought of now being in this recap episode with you guys, and then oh, okay, why are we doing that?
Paul?
If I had to sum it up in 2 words.
I didn't ask you to.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, close enough. If I had to sum this book up in 2 words, I would say words and radiance. Boom. That's all.
Brilliant.
Phenomenal. Wow.
Brilliant.
All right.
To explain my 2 words.
Elliot, any closing words before I wrap us up?
All I'll say is thanks for walking this journey with me, gentlemen, all three of you, and all of you listeners and viewers out there. I've really enjoyed discussing this with you guys and chatting with all of you guys in our comments and Discord. So keep it coming. This journey is only just beginning.
Yep, for sure. We have Warbreaker next. If you guys are reading along with us, our first episode will be the prologue all the way through chapter 10. We are going to be doing a faster pace through Warbreaker. So if you guys are doing Warbreaker, that'll be next week. And with that, we will be closing Words of Radiance and moving on from here. Thanks for joining me, Kiffin, and thanks for joining me as always, Paul and Eliot.
Farewell.
Thank you.
Yeah.